That was fantastic. So we are moving forward in the Sermon on the Mount this morning, and we've gotten to oaths. And so I was thinking this week, have I ever taken an oath? I was trying to think, like, I don't want to count marriage because that's much bigger. That's a vow, that's a covenant. But like, have I ever taken an oath? I've not ever been to court, so I've not like sworn by a testimony. I guess the document I signed when I got my credentials is an oath, but then I realized I've made an oath before. I've not told Rachel about this one. Well, that I was going to share this one. I made an oath before. I had to go way back to 21, which is like a long time ago now, a very different time. And I realized I once went to a Greek 21st birthday party. Now, there's a large population of Greek people in Australia. And so my friends and I were excited because we've heard that at certain Greek parties, they'll shout Greek words and smash plates. And that sounded like the most exciting things to us. And so we went to this Greek 21st, all excited for our chance to shout Greek words and smash plates. And then we got through the party, we got to the speeches, they gave the speeches, and then it didn't happen. There was no shouting of Greek words and no smashing of Greek plates. And so in our disappointment, sitting on the couches, it was me and 3 other fellas, we just felt shattered, like we didn't get to fulfill the dream. We wanted to live the dream that night. And so to lift their encouragement, I got a bit of paper and I wrote down a promise that if I ever was lucky enough to find the right girl and get married, we could shout Greek words and smash plates at my wedding. And so I signed it, and then they signed it, and then to make it official, we got a knife. No, it was just signed. And then we put it on the wall in my room. And for a couple of years, it was a good joke. And then I met this lovely lady that I had no business meeting whatsoever. And then a year and a half later, we find ourselves walking down the aisle. Very lovely venue, very adult, very mature, very grown up. But an oath is an oath. And so as you can see in the photo, we snuck out at a wedding party into the courtyard with a box of brand new brought plates. We shouted Greek words and we smashed plates. So there you go. I've made an oath and I've kept an oath in my life. That's 24-year-old Scott, and I've got so much I want to tell him, but I can't. So we're looking at oaths today. Let me just read the passage. Again, you have heard that it was said that people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make every one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So we're in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus beginning his teaching on the kingdom. And we know it as a Sermon on the Mount, and it started with him describing the values and the characteristics of the kingdom of heaven with the Beatitudes, and then it went on to telling us that if we live according to these teachings, we're going to be the salt and light. Salt purifies and preserves. Light reveals Jesus and exposes darkness. But then he said something in verse 20. He said, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." Now imagine hearing that. Like, if you don't live up to a standard greater than the standard of the gold standard, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven, because the Pharisees would have liked people to believe back then that they were the gold standard of following Jesus. That they lived up to God's law meticulously. But quite often, they were criticized for being hypocritical, proud, and focused on self-appraisal. You see, the Pharisees were all about how they presented themselves, how they appeared to others. But Jesus, as he navigates the Sermon on the Mount, is challenging us beyond appearance, beyond presentation. He's challenging us to what's going on internally. And we've seen that shift in the last few weeks. We've seen that you can live up to the letter of the law by not committing murder, but we're challenged internally on how we face anger and hate. Again, with adultery, you can live up to the letter of the law by not committing adultery, but it's challenging us beyond that to our heart's condition of how we manage lust. And are we able to maintain the purity of our imagination and our thoughts? See, Jesus is exposing the heart. He's moving beyond the outward presentation. And so the way that last week and the week before tackled a topic, but then a different topic. So it said murder, but talked to anger. It said adultery, but talked to lust. This week, it's talking about oaths, but it's actually talking to truth, to honesty, to integrity. You see, the takeaway from today's passage in its simplest form is that followers of Jesus should be true to their word. That we should reflect the truthfulness and faithfulness of God in all our interactions. You know, there's a great kid's story to help us understand truthfulness. We get taught it very young. I'm sure we all know it really well. It's called The Boy Who Cried Dingo. Have we all heard that? I mean, I heard it at a young age. So what happens is there's a boy, because like some of you obviously don't know it, there's a boy who likes to trick his friends and shout dingo, you know, to make them think that a dingo is about to pounce on them. And this is bad because they are a fierce creature. They steal babies. And that was a famous thing that happened in Australia. We don't remember that? No? Dingo Stole My... No, well, there was a great band that called themselves Dingo Stole My Baby. Like, that is a great band name. But anyway, I'm a little bit lighter today because last week was really heavy. So, you know, honesty is a bit easier. Not as much easier, but it's a little bit easier than lust. So the boy would try to trick his friends and say there's a dingo, but then there wouldn't be a dingo. And then what happens is we get to a part of the story where the boy is actually confronted with a dingo and his life's in danger and he screams and he shouts, "Dingo, help, help, help." But nobody believes him because of all the times he shouted there was a dingo and there wasn't. So they didn't believe him anymore. The weight of his word was lost. So let's try to understand some background about this passage for a minute. In the same way that when we looked at murder and adultery, Jesus was taking us back to the 10 Commandments. He's doing that again now. This time he's taking us to the third commandment, which is do not take the Lord's name in vain. This means that we can't misuse God's name, but we also can't use God's name for selfish gains, but we also can't use God's name and act in a way that misrepresents God. So then we get to oaths. An oath is a promise to do something or not do something. But it's greater than that because in the way it's taught in the Old Testament, it's using God as your witness. So in making this oath to do something or not do something, I'm doing it in the eyes of God, and God is my witness that I will do what I say I'm going to do. And if I don't, I believe that God will bring justice if I don't. So if the promise is broken, God will bring justice. But in the same way, it's also, his name is also used to prove the truth of what we're saying. So in the same way as we would as kids, we would say things like, "I swear," or "cross my heart," or I swear on my mother's name," or do we still use Scouts Honor? I remember that being something as kids, like Scouts Honor, it's the truth. They would swear by God's name to emphasize the truthfulness of the statement they were making. So that's sort of where we're at with this. But then what had gone wrong is the Pharisees had started to twist the usage of oaths. They would make promises not using God's name. Because if you made a promise using God's name, you had to keep it. But if you made a promise using the temple or the altar, so if you say, "I promise according to the temple," or "I promise according to the altar," or "I promise according to Jerusalem," well, then that's different because there's some wiggle room there because I didn't promise in God's name, so I might be able to evade the truth in this one or not actually live up to the promise at all. So basically what had happened is the Pharisees, by not swearing in God's name but swearing in other things, they were using the language of oaths but to disguise their dishonest intentions. So they were saying, "We'll do this," or "this is true," but they had no intention on it being true or fulfilling what they said they would do. And so what happens then is if you've got the religious leaders at a time not living up to their words, it's a tough situation because that meant they couldn't be trusted. Now, trust and truth is really important. We know that because we live in a time where trust and truth is a lot harder. Like we don't always know if we can trust our leaders. The institutes that used to shape who we are, we don't even know if we can still trust them anymore. And then we live in a time where technology is such that we actually don't know with certainty always if what we hear or see is actually the truth. So we live in a time where trust and truth are difficult things. What we need to clarify, though, is Jesus isn't saying through this passage that we should never take oaths. He's not saying that oaths are bad. Paul used oaths in his letters. He would swear by the name of God, or God as his witness. Oaths and vows are not the problem. It's the misuse of oaths to hide falsehood and dishonesty. It's almost using oaths to allow yourself to be dishonest. And so Jesus brings it back to the bedrock of this issue, that we are meant to be trustworthy and truthful, that when we say yes, it should be yes, and when we say no, it should be no. And this is obviously a conversation about our character and our integrity. Jesus goes a little further later in Matthew. He has this moment in Matthew 23 where he has these, it's called the 7 woes. And it's these 7 woes that he has against the Pharisees and the teachers of the day. And there's one that I think, overlaps with this. I'll just read it to you. It says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean." I like the imagery of this woe, mainly because it's talking about a cup and it just makes me think of a good cup of coffee. But, I'll use tea as a reference so you can all come along with me. But imagine someone gave you a cup of tea. Now, when they're giving you the cup of tea, it looks good on the outside. It's not a dirty cup. It's a clean cup. It's polished. It's nice. The cup is important. I think cup is 50% of the experience when it comes to a beverage, whether it's, coffee, tea, or another kind of beverage. The cup is 50% of the experience. Like, you can have a good coffee in a bad cup, and it's just not enjoyable. This is important. We need to know this. But anyway, so someone gives you a cup of tea. And the cup looks really nice, really well presented, and so you're grateful. And you trust that person, and then you drink the cup of tea. But then as you start to drink that tea and the inside of the cup is exposed, you start to realize that the cup you're drinking from is not in a good way, that it is dirty. Has anyone ever been in that experience before? I think of some of the tradies in the church who maybe go to people's houses to fix things and repair things, and they offer you a tea. I feel like you guys have been in this position before. How does that feel, though? Like, you've had this tea and then you look and you realize you've been drinking out of a dirty cup. How does that make you feel about the drink you've just had? You don't feel really good. You don't even really want to, you're thinking, do I really want to keep this drink down? See, I think this relates to people's experience of us. I don't want people to walk away from an experience with us and think, you know what? Now I've drunk that and I've seen what really looks like. That doesn't make me feel very good. We don't want to be people who look good on the outside, that present ourselves well on the outside. That when people really get to know us and what we're about, when they really get to know our character and in our integrity, we want to feel like that was something worth drinking in. That's something that brings life. Wouldn't it be great if we were like a cup that was worth drinking? A cup that was clean on the inside, because that's what Jesus is speaking about all these weeks of the Sermon on the Mount. He's talking about what's going on inside. He's talking about our character. He's talking about our integrity. And if we work on the condition of our heart, then anger is not going to be much of the same as a problem. Lust is not going to be the same problem. Honesty is going to be easier. You see, this is really important because a belief in Jesus is not just for us. A belief in Jesus is meant to transform us, but then it's a call to allow that transformation to affect the people around us. Now, our beliefs challenge people, but challenging people doesn't convict people. It's easy to challenge, but challenge doesn't equal conviction. You know what I've realized over years equals conviction? Consistency. Consistency creates conviction. Your character is responsible for your consistency. So if we can work on our character and be consistent, that will create conviction for the people in our life. See, when they interact with us, they want to see that we really actually love Jesus. They want to see that we are really being transformed by the love of Christ and what we believe. You see, perfection is a presentation. So none of us are being called to perfection. We're being called to holiness, which is intimacy. It's not perfection. Perfection is outward. Intimacy is an inward reality. You see, the conversation of truthfulness is important because truthfulness affects relationships. Truthfulness affects relationships. See, when we're not honest with each other, it creates separation. It means that we're hiding from each other. And relationships are so crucial on openness, on vulnerability, on honesty. And it's really important for spiritual connectivity, something we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, that we are honest and open and vulnerable, and we present ourselves as ourselves. You see, we can be dishonest with our words, but we can also be dishonest with our actions. And one of the ways we're dishonest with our actions is how we present ourselves. What we don't want to do is create a space when we walk in, we think, oh, now I'm at church, I need to present myself a certain way. I think about that all the time because I think sometimes people are just walking in and they've never been in church before. And I often wonder, what are they thinking walking in? What are they thinking about how they're allowed to be? Are they able to walk in and feel like I can be myself here and I'm going to be embraced? That honesty is safe, that honesty is okay. I often quite think that we need a statue in the walkway. I've told a few people about this before. Maybe we'll get there, but what if we got some cast iron shoes right at the entrance, just filled them with ash and wrote like, for those who left it too late? Like, wouldn't that just break the ice? Like you walk in, it's like, oh, this church has got a sense of humor. Well, I hope it's a sense of humor. The point I'm trying to say is we've got to be honest with who we are. We're not meant to walk in and present a perfect picture. We're meant to be honest. We're all here to know Jesus. We're all here to follow Jesus. We're all here to be transformed by His Spirit, which means we're not perfect, we can't pretend, and we can't hide. Now, it doesn't mean we walk in and then immediately announce everything. That's not what I'm saying. But we need to be honest about who we are. We need to be open with the fact that we all are on a journey of sanctification and we all need to continue that journey together. We're not here to put on a show because God moves in our honesty. Also, we all sung at the start, to you, our God, we are open. Nothing here is hidden. So we all sung that at the start. So at the end, when we pray and we worship again and God starts to speak to us, remember you said to God, nothing here is hidden, which you've just given Him full power to work on it all. If we're going to break every chain, we first need to be honest about the chains that need breaking. But if we're talking about consistency and being impactful, being salt and light, there's no consistency without honesty. And so one of the things that I felt challenged by reading this passage when it comes to character and integrity is, are we honest? Are we truthful? I'd like to think I am honest, but you know what? I've been reminded by my children quite recently that I'm not honest. And you don't even realize sometimes where you're not honest. And so, for example, I'll say, I want to watch a Spider-Man movie with Elijah, but Ollie's a bit young for that. So instead of telling Ollie, I'm going to set up with Elijah, you need to go to bed, Elijah and I'll try to encourage Elijah to pretend that we're all going to bed. So when Ollie's asleep, we can watch Spider-Man. And I'll say, don't tell Ollie. And he'll look at me and go, but Dad, that's dishonest. I'm like, you're right, that is dishonest. But it's easier. But it's dishonest. And see, children are black and white. They don't see the layers. They don't see the nuance. When we break from childhood and grow in our brain and start to see the nuance, honesty becomes a lot harder because we start to measure it with a lot of gray area. I think sometimes that's why it's great having kids in our life, because they cut right through that to the core of the issue and challenge us to simply be honest. But the other challenge with honesty and consistency and salt and light is who we are. Are we one kind of person when we're here together, but then a different kind of person when we're elsewhere? So are we right now our church person, but then when we go to football with our mates, we're a different kind of person, or when we go down to the pub with the mates, we're a different kind of person, or when we're at work, we're a different kind of person? Because that's dishonest too. And so the people in our life that don't know Jesus and need the love of Christ, they're really confused when they see that. They're really confused when they see us behave like Christians when we're with our Christian friends in our Christian circles. And then they're really confused when we behave completely differently when we're not around our Christian friends. And that creates dishonesty as well. So I think there is a real challenge here is, are we honest? Are we truthful? And I hope the answer to that is no. Because the truth is none of us are 100% honest and 100% truthful. And if the answer is no, there's no space for transformation. There's no dependence on God. The answer is simple. We're not. We all need to grow in that. We all need to improve. We all need to be challenged by it. It would be really easy to blow past this passage because we had some big challenging weeks. And there's probably some big challenging weeks together. But you know what? 90% of the time, I'm honest. But actually, this has to be a gut check like every other passage. We have to be able to sit here and say, we are not honest. And we still need dependence on him. We still need his Spirit to transform us, to grow us, to sanctify us, to challenge us. Because the minute we feel like we don't, we will slip out of the fruit of the Spirit and into the fruit of the flesh. So, the takeaway from today's teaching is the simplest form, that we as followers of Jesus should be people of our word. But to achieve that, we need to do that in dependence of him, empowered by his Spirit, reflecting the truthfulness and faithfulness of God in all interactions. I'm just going to pray now, and then we're going to go back to worship. So why don't we stand and the team can come up and then I'll pray. Almighty God, I come before you today and ask for the gift of honesty. Help us to always speak the truth, to act with integrity, and be transparent in all dealings. May our words and actions reflect your goodness and righteousness. That may we be a shining example of honesty to those around us. That we won't pretend. That will be real. That will work on the inside of the cup instead of the outside, Lord. That we would be salt and light, but it would be in your strength, in your power, as you transform us. To you, our God, we're open. Nothing here is hidden. Amen.